In regards to the polarity of the nation's political biases, the media peddles the same tired blank. So I'm going to stop right there. There's that blank. And now at that point, you can see a lot of this is not that important, but when you get to this idea of the same tired what, you can see that aha, after this comma, it's going to elaborate on that. The repetition, that is the same tired, the same blank, the repetition of a conventional idea. So you can see there's a match there between the same matches the repetition, or the same tired really matches that repetition, and then when you have blank, that blank matches that with conventional idea. And which word is conventional idea? Well, auguries are things that tell us about the future. Bode something about the future. That doesn't work. Epiphanies or revelations. That doesn't work. Trope can mean one of two things. It can mean a metaphor, or it can also mean just a tired conventional idea. That works perfect for this context. Anodynes are something that provide relief. Deceptions is not supported by context. Okay, as you can tell, this is a very long sentence. And the idea is really cutting through the noise and focusing what's important. So let's do that. Let's just cut out words. Let's leave Beijing. Beijing worked with something. Here's that keyword. What goes in there? So I don't care about any of this. Bird's nest, not as important. But getting to the important part, it would have taken 5 years for most to complete. But Beijing finished it in less than half that time. So it worked with impressive what? And so you can see by just focusing on just this little part here that Beijing worked with something, that means that they were quick because they finished a massive project in half the time. We can say, come up with our own word, let's say speed. Now this, of course, is not a difficult sentence because of hacking through all the noise here. I think many people were able to do that, but it's because of the vocab tested here. Now repute is a great trick word. I think if you're here watching this, you may very well have chosen repute. But repute doesn't touch on the idea of speed, of swiftness. So that's out. Tyranny. I don't think, oh, I hear the Beijing government's really tyrannical. It's nothing to do with the sentence whatsoever. Again, a tyrant is one who rules with extreme power and oftentimes wields it arbitrarily. Dispatch. You'll say, oh, you dispatch someone, you send them off to go. Now, dispatch, as you notice here, everything, and there will always be consistency in parts of speech here. Everything is a noun. And so the noun form of dispatch means speed. When you work with dispatch, you work quickly. And that's the answer. And hardiness doesn't match the context, and insolence is rudeness, doesn't match the context whatsoever.
Okay, so let's talk about this. What is the answer here? Why do we have two eyes? The pattern is that while symmetry is one reason, comma, there's another reason. So we have the well, comma, add something pattern. Well, the correct answer, which we'll start with, is redundancy. Why redundancy? Well, when two things are redundant to each other, you don't strictly need both of them. You have two of the same thing, right? Well, we have two of the same eyes. And they're not strictly both necessary because you're able to see, right here, able to see with only one eye. So we can say the eyes are redundant to each other. Now, let's talk about adaptation. Adaptation seems tempting because an adaptation can help you do something better. And it does say our binocular vision would be greatly diminished. So one aspect of our vision would be diminished if we only had one eye. But it's saying that although that's true, what the sentence is focusing on is that we don't need both eyes. So the sentence is focusing more on the redundancy of the eyes to each other than the adaptation, strictly speaking. So adaptation we don't want. Frugality. When you're frugal, you're getting by with just the minimum you need. Well, we're not doing this with our eyes. We have two eyes when we only need one eye. So frugality would kind of be the opposite of what we're looking for. And in addition, frugality generally refers to using the minimum amount of money, not the minimum amount of body parts. Okay, indispensability. Indispensability means a quality of being absolutely 100% needed. Well, we've already said that two eyes aren't strictly needed. We can see with only one eye. So indispensability, like frugality, is kind of the opposite of what we're looking for. Irregularity. Well, when things are irregular, they don't match each other. They're a little bit different. But our two eyes have symmetry. They do match each other. We have the same thing on both sides. So irregularity also directly contradicts the sentence. And this circles us back to redundancy. That's really the answer we're looking for.
News blogs have become popular, as many offer blank commentary not found in most traditional media, which tend to eschew publishing writing that may be deemed offensive by some. So in this case, we have a contrast here between news blogs and traditional media. Traditional media tend to avoid publishing writing that could be offensive. However, news blogs don't necessarily do the same. They do the opposite. They may publish writing that could be deemed offensive by some. And so we want to kind of come up with a word here and match that word, because it's not as though we're getting an exact word such as offensive commentary, but something that may cause offense. So let's look at the answers. Fastidious. Fastidious means that you fuss over insignificant details. So that's not likely to be offensive. If something is trenchant and you offer trenchant commentary, that is incisive and biting and really getting to the point of something, and that could be deemed offensive by some. Poignant, on the other hand, means touching. Maybe one of those Lassie-like stories where the dog comes running back at the end of the movie and everyone is kind of sad. Oh, the dog finally reached its owner. So this sort of stuff, you really wouldn't have poignant commentary, and something that's touching in such a way isn't likely to be deemed offensive by some. Timely does not suit the context here. Something that's relevant to the time there's no keywords that support that. And finally, insightful, where this word sounds great. Insightful commentary, we hear that all the time. There are no context clues here supporting the idea the blank is insightful. Because if something is insightful, it's not likely to be deemed offensive by some. So you can get rid of that, and the answer is trenchant. Paul spoke blank and would stop and start frequently, at times uttering nothing more than a few unintelligible syllables. So how is he speaking? And so the main key words here, he stops and starts frequently. So he starts, like in that way. And if you need a little bit more context, it says uttering nothing more, or at times uttering nothing more than a few unintelligible syllables. And so you can see he's definitely not speaking ceaselessly, which means without stop. He's not speaking noiselessly making any noise at all. He is speaking, it's just broken up constantly. Let's go to the top here. Cogently means forceful and persuasive. It usually describes an argument. Does not make sense here. It doesn't sound arrogant, where you're looking down at other people in this haughty manner. And you can see that word haltingly, stopping and starting. Haltingly doesn't just mean stopping, but has the idea of stopping and starting. That's our answer.
Okay, so we see that the Roman Emperor Caligula here is often denigrated. If somebody's denigrated, they're thought less of, they're insulted, they're described as bad. So it says that he's often described as bad, but is also actually. And actually is a contrast word where you say, okay, this seems like it could be true, but actually this other very different thing is true. So we have a contrast, and we want something then that's the opposite of denigrated. So lauded seems like a strong candidate here. Instead of being insulted and put down, if you're lauded, you're praised and you're raised up, and people say, oh, this person's great. So that seems like a good opposite of denigrated. But let's see why the other words don't work. Well, defamed doesn't work because it's similar to denigrated. If somebody's defamed, they're insulted and they're put down. Perhaps unfairly, but they're still insulted and put down. So that matches denigrated, and we want the opposite. This is that word actually. Okay, overlooked. Now it's saying that that Caligula would be overlooked for doing something good, for reinstating democratic elections. Well, that's not the opposite of denigrated. That could be a reason Caligula is denigrated, that he's insulted because people overlook and don't notice that he helped democracy in his own time. Okay, underscored. Underscored means emphasized. Now, if Caligula is being emphasized for being pro-democracy, that's kind of a praise in a way, because they're emphasizing something he did that was presumably good. However, emphasize is not nearly the direct contrast to denigrated, and actually indicates a strong contrast. So just the idea of underscoring that somebody did something good isn't the same as the opposite of denigrating him. In fact, you could say Caligula was awful even though he did this thing. I'd emphasize he did this thing, but he was awful. So it's actually possible to denigrate them while emphasizing that they did something good that doesn't redeem them. Okay, repudiated. If you repudiate somebody, you say they're awful, they're terrible, you reject them. That's the same as denigrated rather than a shift away from it. So, A, lauded, definitely has to be the correct answer. Clearly the best.